you're never going to have children ever again. Like, even if you want to, you physically cannot ever give birth again. That is what I heard a couple of weeks ago, and that is what has been replaying in my mind the past couple of weeks because I had a hysterectomy. Hi, I'm Selena Faye, your midlife guru, cheerleader, compadre, whatever you want to call me, but I'm here to be your friend and help you navigate through midlife. So hysterectomies are very common, and it doesn't have to happen in midlife, but a lot of times in midlife, that's when we end up having to have a hysterectomy. So I want to tell you a little bit about my journey with a hysterectomy and kind of leading up to it and kind of prepare you in case you might be going through something the same. So I'm 46 now. At the age of 35, I decided I did not want any children. Actually, before that, I decided. I have 3 kids. I had them very young in age. And I had decided that unless I got married to a man and I felt solid and secure and we wanted to have more kids, we would. But 35 would be my cutoff. I did not want any kids after 35. And lo and behold, I hit 35 and it was time to do something. So I told the doctor, you better cut them, burn them, tie them, whatever you got to do, but make sure I don't have any more children, because I didn't want any more children at that time. And I knew I didn't want it after life because it's harder to give birth and age and all that good kind of stuff that comes with it. Nothing against people that do. This is my personal experience. So getting my tubes tied was a great decision as far as making sure that I wouldn't have any more children. But that came with a whole new set of problems that I had no idea might happen. So I found out that after getting your tubes tied, you can have lots of complications. I should have studied that beforehand, so I want to suggest that if you're having any kind of medical procedure done and you have the opportunity to think about it first, please do that. So after I had my tubes tied, I started having extremely painful periods, cramping in the front and the back. Cramping so bad on day 1 that I would curl up in the fetal position in a ball with my heating pads. Taking Midol like candy within the prescribed amount of time, but Midol, I should have took stock in that stuff. And I would have shooting pains down my legs and it would hurt. I could only stand for so long and then I had to sit. And then it got to be, over this 10-year span, it got to be where my menstrual cycles literally were just me passing blood clots. And I'm not talking about little blood clots, I'm talking about big blood clots that would fill the bottom of the toilet, the size of the little round part at the bottom. And those things are hard to pass. When you're trying to pass it through something that's like a coffee straw, a clot, it was extremely painful. And so I just dealt with it. You know, I knew I couldn't have a hysterectomy in life at that point in time. I worked as a nurse, and that's a physical job. I couldn't take 6 to 8 weeks off for the recovery because I financially couldn't afford it. So I just dealt with it. And for some reason, I always associated, well, when people have heavy bleeding where they're saturating pads quickly, that's time for them to have a hysterectomy. Well, for some reason, I just didn't associate heavy bleeding saturating pads with passing big blood clots. But finally, I went to the doctor last year and I was telling her about it, and I was at a different place. I have good insurance and the ability to take some time off to recover. And she's like, oh yeah, you need to see about having a hysterectomy. So she referred me to an OBGYN who specializes in the uterus. And we talked and we thought about doing a uterine ablation. And that is where inside the uterus, there's a lining. And every month when you have your cycle, that lining gets thicker because it's preparing to hold the baby in it. And when you don't get pregnant, you just bleed that lining out. Well, that lining builds over time. And that's what causes the heavy bleeding and lots of other complications. So there's a procedure called a uterine ablation where they can go in and they can burn that lining completely, and then you won't have a period for a while. Now, over time, that lining will build back up. But because of my age, I'm close to going into menopause, and so she felt that that wouldn't be a problem. I'm like, heck yeah, that's like a day surgery, back to work in a couple of days. Let's do that. Well, we did the blood work. We had to do an ultrasound. They had to do a vaginal ultrasound, go in there. And unfortunately, that was not an option for me because I had lots of fibroids and cysts. So my only option at this point in time was a hysterectomy. Now, they can do hysterectomies. They can do a partial hysterectomy where they just take out your uterus. or they can do a total hysterectomy where they take out your uterus and your ovaries, which is the most common one. And when they take out the ovaries, it takes out your ability to produce hormones. Therefore, it throws you into menopause immediately, like that same day. So total hysterectomy, that's what it was for me. And after leaving the doctor's office, I can remember just thinking, I'm never going to have kids again. And then my next thought is, why does it matter? You don't want kids. 10 years ago, you put an end to having kids, but it's just something about like, that's me as a woman. Like, if something were to ever happen and I needed my uterus, or I needed to house a baby in that uterus, I can't do that anymore. It didn't last long, but those thoughts still do creep into my mind sometimes. And I have to tell myself, you didn't want any more kids. You have 3 wonderful kids. You have grandkids now. You don't need to have any kids. But it is common to think that and to have those feelings. And I want you to know that that's okay that you feel that way. And so leading up to the hysterectomy, I was so scared. You know, I don't do well under anesthesia. It takes me a very long time to wake up. And when I do wake up, I am projectile vomiting everywhere and can't seem to control it. So if I can avoid a surgery, who goes in wanting a surgery? But still, if I can avoid a surgery, that's exactly what I want to do. So that scared me. And so about a week before surgery, my doctor scheduled me an appointment where we went in and we kind of talked about what the procedure would be like. And it'd be about an hour and a half. She would be taking my uterus and my ovaries. It would be laparoscopic unless my fibroids or something were too big, and then they had to cut me completely. Laparoscopic is where there's just 4 little holes and they do all the cutting inside, but then they actually take the uterus and ovaries out through the vagina. So I was like, okay, and what about throwing me into menopause? And she said that we wouldn't start hormones right away. We would wait about 2 weeks, and then I would have a follow-up and we would start on some hormones if that's something that I wanted to do. So I start researching hormones, what's going on with my hormones. You know, you read good and bad anywhere you go on the internet, any video you watch, anything like that. If you're looking for the bad, you're going to find the bad. If you're looking for the good, you're going to find the good. And you're going to find lots and lots of different opinions. So take what I say with a grain of salt. Take what else you hear and what you read with a grain of salt. You have to decide for yourself what you think is best. And sometimes you have to just try it to see if you like it. And it may work for you. And if it doesn't, try something else. That's okay. Nobody has to be perfect and nobody's going to get it right the first time. Also in my appointment with the doctor, I'm like, well, am I going to bleed a lot afterwards? Like when I have a baby, you know, you have a lot of bleeding and stuff. And she's like, no, the part that bleeds, we're taking out. And she said, you may have a little spotting because it is a surgery and there will be cuts and sutures internally inside you. But that should be it. You shouldn't have any heavy bleeding. And if you do, you need to call your doctor because that is not normal. Then I had some blood work done just to make sure that everything was okay. Because a lot of times they won't do surgery if you're diabetic and your blood sugars are high, if your blood levels are low, because you're going to lose some blood during the surgery. And then I had an appointment with the hospital as a pre-op, where they gave me this special soap to wash myself with, which had never happened before. This is not for all hospitals. This is not for all experiences, but this was my experience. I had soap I had to wash myself in 3 days, every day for 3 days up to surgery time. Go in for surgery and so scared. But the hospital was great. They made me feel comfortable, answered all my questions. They reassured me. I said, be sure you give me something because I will come out projectile vomiting. They gave me tons of medicines for that. Did take me a while to wake up from my surgery, but I wasn't throwing up. I was so glad. It was the dry mouth that was the problem, and I can handle that over vomiting any day. Went home that day. It was a day surgery. I slept for the first 2 days, ate a lot, pretty much just got up to go to the bathroom and get back in the bed. Gas pains were rough, but I've had a pretty good recovery. I'm about 3 weeks out now. So that's kind of what led up to my hysterectomy. My next video I'm going to do is about recovery from my hysterectomy, and I'm going to do some videos on preparing for your hysterectomy, what you need to buy, what you need to have for your hysterectomy so you have a smoother recovery as possible, and hormones and all those good things. So I will catch you on the next video.